is real. Listen.
Hi, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Kathy.
And this is Curious Explorers. Hey, Kath.
Hey, Trace.
How's it going?
It's going well. How about you?
All right, thanks. I've been feeling a little different, a little something in the air. I imagine.
That's so funny you said that. So funny.
I bet it's the same reason.
Yes. I feel like it's turned. Like, I know there are going to be people out there who are so upset that summer is over, I'm not one of them,
I
but
know.
there are going to be people out there. Although I had a great summer, I had a really terrific summer, but it does feel like fall over. Even though it's hot, it was 80 degrees today, but it wasn't summer hot. It was autumn. It was autumn warm. I could feel it in the air.
The little crisp morning air where you're like, oh,
Yes.
do I need a little
The
jacket?
breeze, that where you're like, oh, the earth is turning in my direction.
The pumpkin
October.
spice lattes are going to come out.
That's
too.
right.
I
That's
don't
right.
know.
And I will say this: I have my first little pumpkin in my garden.
Get
It's
out.
that big. It's about the size of a quarter. So
Oh
I'm
my God,
excited.
I love it.
though.
I
Yeah.
love it. In Asbury Park?
Yeah,
Oh
on
my
the
goodness.
roof. Yeah, on the
I
roof.
can't wait to see it.
I know.
I was
It's funny.
thinking, and let's put this out there to our beloveds, because I was thinking we might want to do like a curious, creepy countdown
Sure.
of some sort. We'll figure it out. But I want people to send us their topics that they really want to hear about. They have to be a little chilling, a little creepy, a little unnerving, perhaps, a little dark and
Well,
mysterious.
I will say we'll come up with scary ones either way, but if you send us yours, we can definitely dive into those.
And possibly
right?
give you a shout out.
Yeah, definitely give you a shout out. We'll definitely give you a shout out. And also, I'm really interested, and this is something that I put out on social media, on the Instagram, on the TikTok, I think. I actually don't remember where I did it, but I want to know what your haunted attractions are in your areas, in your area. What's going on in your state? What's going on in your city? What haunted houses do you guys go to? And the reason is I'm going to enjoy Halloween this year. For the past 20 years, Halloween has always been my super busy time, but I am carving out some time so that I can enjoy it again. And so I want to hear, what haunted attractions do you guys love, and where should I go? Where should I bring my explorative curiosity?
Or where should we go?
To your location? Yeah, well,
if I can get out of the area.
Yeah, and you don't like jump scares. So,
oh my God, no.
Yeah. This would be Tracy's hell. So if
I only like real ghosts, not fake ghosts.
You don't even like them.
I kind of do. I like nice ghosts.
You like the idea of them. You don't like scary stuff. But I do. Right. And I love, obviously I'm going to hit Salem. I'm going to go up to Salem, early in September to avoid the mayhem. And then immediately afterwards, cause I'm doing that event with Adam. That gives me a couple of weekends there in the middle where I am willing to travel. So, there's a huge haunted house down in Texas I've been hearing about for years. I might actually go down there. But I've done most of the, I may not,
that would be awful.
Texas might call to me. I will tell you, I doubt Texas is going to.
No, I meant like, what if something scary gets you?
Oh, yeah. Well, then
Texas,
that would make for the best podcast. Tracy's, the disappearance of the Curious Explorer.
Oh, the chilling adventures of Kathy Kelly.
Yeah, exactly. It rolls off the tongue.
Yeah.
So it just rolls off the tongue.
Well, while you were exploring Transylvania again, because you're a frequent flyer, you're the only Transylvanian frequent flyer I know. I need to get out more. There's probably more.
It's so worth going. It's so worth going.
I've heard. I've seen seen your photos. But
yes,
as you know,
the food is great too.
I just picture like blood pudding or something gross and scary.
Oh, that's First of all, that's delicious.
Ooh.
Blood pudding is delicious. But
I'll let you have mine.
They have that in Ireland. They don't have that in Transylvania.
Okay. Well, as you know, I had a chance to interview Lori Williams,
Yes.
very well known remote viewer, extraordinarily accurate, and ask her all about the whole Bigfoot remote viewing. Lori has some, I was going to say chestnuts, which isn't really a very nice thing to say. Everybody's gonna be like, I'm not watching anymore. But she did those three, it was like more than 7 years ago. And I'm so mad that Coast to Coast AM took the episodes down. But anything over 7 years old, they took down. I wish we should all write in and petition them to put it
Mm.
back because Lori did these three blind targets and then got the reveal on Coast to Coast AM, where, I mean, honestly, if she had bombed, it would have been like a gigantically public bombing, and she was spot on. And so we went over the
Wow.
one about Bigfoot, which I
Mhm.
honestly did not believe in until I saw that episode, and I have Lori's sessions, and I put a few, screenshots in our episode from last time. So if people haven't seen it, please check it out and check out the video if you can, but, she knew, like, right before she like, right as she put the pen to the paper, she was like, "Oh, no, this is Bigfoot."
Right, right. You're like things you never thought you'd say. Like,
Yeah, the w it's only Monday, and
and already Bigfoot's here.
so, yeah, that was pretty exciting, but I'm also extremely excited now that we are back in the same virtual space to hear what your topic is today, and I hope it is sufficiently chilling and creepy and dark and mysterious, or
You
that or the
know,
countdown has to start the week after.
no, I'm gonna say this. It's very traditional, right? But it's a different take on traditional. And the reason is that I really got a lot of feedback from the Van Helsing episode
Oh, awesome.
where we were looking at kind of the real world inspiration for the character from Dracula. And so, and what I found really interesting about it was, we have all of these different things that scare us, but sometimes it's not the supernatural. Sometimes it's what we're capable of or what we do
Ooh,
that's scarier. And so, a few years back in 2018, I went to Germany for a couple of weeks. You probably remember. I went for Kramp. I went for a bunch of Krampus festivals, but while I was there, I actually visited Frankenstein's castle, and Frankenstein's castle in Dracula is in Germany is not related to the novel, right?
really?
No, it's not related
I
to the
didn't know there
novel.
was a real place, honestly.
Yeah, no, there's a real person. He was an alchemist. Like there's lots of stuff, but it was on the path that Mary Shelley took on the journey that Mary Shelley took to get to Lake Geneva, which is where she did start to write the novel that became it was Prometheus and Prometheus Unbound, which ultimately became what we call Frankenstein. And when I was there, I was thinking about it, like all of these different things that we pull in and then they kind of coalesce in somebody's subconscious until they pull it up and it all becomes pieces of it. And I started thinking about how the story of Frankenstein, which is one of the kind of iconic monsters, right? Um, and how it's really not supernatural at all. That there's nothing supernatural about it. It's based entirely on human experience and activity. And so that's what I did. I decided to do the real story behind Frankenstein and
Wow.
Frankenstein's monster. So without further
This
ado,
will be the lightest, least creepy episode of the
I
next
don't.
several weeks, though.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, because it is creep,
Uh,
like it is, digging up bodies
it's
and
not
and
creepy,
yeah.
but we could get worse.
Like I think people can be a lot creepier than ghosts.
Yeah, yes.
So all right. Without further
Yeah.
ado, Frankenstein: The Real Story Behind the Monster. When you hear the word Frankenstein, what do you think of? What do you see?
You really want me to tell
S-
you?
no,
I was
you
talking, I
can.
didn't know
Go,
it was
go
your turn.
ahead. Go ahead.
Really?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have an Uncle Frank, and the kids in school used to be like, "Is his last name? Is his name? Is it
Well,
Frankenstein?" But it's not.
that
It's
is
the other
kind of
side of the
funny.
family.
That is
That's the
kind of
only thing I
funny.
think of.
So other than Tracy's Uncle Frank,
Who's actually
some of
quite
us,
nice.
who was lovely, lovely, and
And
not
he
at
does live
all.
in Texas now.
He does have some scars. There's some stitching. Um, some of us
And he was
probably
actually in
see,
Germany last week, which is totally nuts.
yeah, at his house, at
At
his
his
family's
castle.
house, at his family's castle. It was funny when I was there. They were I was there in December, but they were getting ready. They were going to have a huge um, New Year's Eve party at Castle Frankenstein, and I was just like, "Well, that's the coolest thing.
Are you going
That's the
back?
coolest thing ever." I would totally go back for that. I would totally go back for that. But there's a lot of weird. There's a lot of places I would like to visit at their. Like, it's funny to me because probably for 150 years they didn't do anything about being Castle Frankenstein, and then suddenly they're like, "Wait a
We
second,
could market the
we could do something with this." Because I will tell you, in Transylvania, they don't do jack for Dracula.
Do they
They don't
think
do
people won't
anything.
know if they're quiet about it? Like,
No, I
I don't
think
know.
they take it a little bit more seriously than, and they don't want to be made fun of. It's very similar to how the people in the Pine Barrens used to be about the Jersey Devil,
Okay, I get it.
which is like, well, we're not going to lean in on that because you might make fun of us. And then, somebody's going to come in and be like, we're not going to make fun of you, but we're going to make you $1 billion, and there's virtually nothing. There's virtually no marketing for Dracula anything in Romania, which is interesting. But when you're there, you're like, oh yeah, this is totally where Dracula would be. Which is funny because Bram Stoker never went. He never saw. He wrote those stories based entirely on travel logs. So travel writers wrote with such great detail that he was able to write really accurately about the Carpathians and things like that.
It's
So,
like the AI book of today. Almost, not
yeah,
really.
exactly.
Actually,
Travel
it still
logs.
seems a little bit better.
Yeah, it's travel logs. Well, at least it was people.
Yes.
So some people, I mean, I think generally speaking, when I think of Frankenstein, I actually think of the black and white Frankenstein, but some people will think
Yeah.
of a hulking green figure with bolts on his neck, lightning splitting a black sky, and a mad scientist shouting like, "It's alive," which is one of those great iconic cinema moments. But that's not the creature that Mary Shelley created. Not really. In the original novel, which was published in 1818, the creature has no name. Frankenstein is the scientist, Victor Frankenstein, a man who sought to do what no human being had done before: create life from death. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus, is far more complex than a stitched together monster that we see in the Universal movies. It's part gothic horror, part science fiction, part philosophical tragedy, and it is steeped in the real events, scientific debates, and personal heartbreak of her own life. And it's really important to remember too, she was only 18. Like she was young, but an 18-year-old at that time was a mature woman. She'd already been through a lot. And this is the story of how that 18-year-old woman, on a stormy summer holiday in Switzerland, created a tale that would define modern horror and science fiction and still speak urgently in our own time. It's interesting that this story is not related to the supernatural, but it has a gothic fear rooted in science and in man's desire to control nature. That's what I found really fascinating about it, right? Was that it is an iconic monster. It's not supernatural at all. So it was the year without a summer. The summer of 1816 should have been warm, but across Europe, something strange was happening. The skies were dim, the air was cold and damp, and in some places, snow fell in June. Crops failed, rivers swelled. The newspaper called it the most extraordinary weather remembered by the oldest inhabitant. And I don't know who that was, but apparently they didn't remember a worse summer. And it was the year without a summer. The cause lay half a world away, with the eruption of Mount Tambora in what is now Indonesia. And that had happened the year before. It was the largest volcanic explosion in recorded history. Ash and sulfur were flung more than 25 miles into the atmosphere, creating a haze that circled the globe. Sunlight dimmed, temperatures dropped by an average of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, which is huge, enough to wreak havoc on the world's climate. In England, 1816 was called the poverty year. In France, famine pushed the price of bread beyond what many could afford. And in Switzerland, where the poet Lord Byron had rented a villa by Lake Geneva, the weather was relentlessly wet and cold. It just was raining constantly. At the villa, a white three-story house with green shutters, um, that sat upon the slope above water, Byron was joined by a small but remarkable group. Percy Bysshe Shelley, his 18-year-old lover, Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, Mary's stepsister, Claire Claremont, and Byron's personal physician, John Polidori. We could do a podcast on each single person
I'm sure.
that was there. These were what came out of this summer in Geneva, at Lake Geneva, is astonishing, right? It's really crazy. They'd come for the sunshine and the mountain air, which obviously they weren't getting. What they got instead was weeks of rain and storms. An almost perpetual rain confines us, Mary wrote in her journal. Day after day, she wrote, the lake, she noted, was dull and melancholy. And so they stayed indoors. They read poetry and spoke philosophy. They played music. And one night they turned to a book of ghost stories called Phantasmagoriana, a French translation of German tales of the supernatural. So you can imagine, and remember, all of these, I think Byron was probably in his early 30s. Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, who we now know as Mary Shelley, was 18, and Shelley was like 26. Polidori was 22. Claire, I think, was 16. So I mean, you're talking about a group of relatively young people. Byron might have been a little bit of an outlier there. So they're hanging out. It's raining. There's nothing to do. So they tell ghost stories. That's what you do. So they stayed indoors. They stayed indoors. And Lord Byron, ever the provocateur, suggested that they each try to write their own horror story.
Wow.
Now, in her preface to Frankenstein, when it was republished in 1831, Mary remembered it this way. We will each write a ghost story. I busied myself to think of a story to rival those which had excited us to this task, one which would speak to the mysterious fears of our nature and awaken thrilling horror. The challenge set the room buzzing. Polidori began a vampire story that would in time inspire Dracula. Byron toyed with a fragment of a tale about an undead nobleman. Percy Shelley scribbled down ideas, and Mary had nothing. For days she struggled. And remember, Byron and Shelley were big deals. These guys were big literary deals. So here to have this young woman who was not a hothouse flower, she knew how to, she stood her own. But imagine having to come up with an idea, to impress these guys, right? So for days she struggled. Have you thought of a story? Byron would ask, and she would reply, not yet. And then one night, or perhaps in the early hours of the morning, she had what she later called a waking dream. She had these often. She had nightmares, she had waking dreams, she had lucid dreams. She was a sleepwalker. She had lots of these issues. And in it, quote, I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out on the working of some powerful engine and then showing signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half vital motion. She saw, she said, quote, the horrid thing open its dull yellow eye. And when she woke, she knew that she'd had her story, and not just a ghost story, something stranger, darker, and far more ambitious. So let's talk about Mary Shelley a little bit. Her life was a life of loss and tragedy. Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin was born on August 30th, 1797 in Somerstown, London, to a family that had already lived in the eye of controversy. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft. She was one of the most daring and influential thinkers of the late 18th century. In her book, A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, Wollstonecraft argued for women's education and autonomy at a time when such ideas were considered radical and even dangerous. Her father, William Godwin, was a philosopher whose inquiry concerning political justice championed reason, equality, and the belief in the potential for human society to improve without the need for oppressive government. Mary's so these were thinkers. These were people that would have fostered and nurtured their daughter's intellectual curiosity. Um, but Mary's mother died just 11 days after giving birth to her
Oh,
from complications of fever. Mary would grow up knowing her only through her writings, and she later said, "Her presence has been ever before me. Her voice, though silent, spoke to me from every page." Mary's childhood was intellectually rich, but emotionally uneven. Godwin remarried, bringing Mary a stepmother, Mary Jane Clairmont, whom she had a strained relationship. She often escaped to her father's library, immersing herself in literature, philosophy, history, and natural science. At 15, Mary met the poet Percy Bysshe Shelley. He was already married to Harriet Westbrook, but Mary was drawn to his idealism. He also was sexy. He also was the most popular poet of his time. And when we think of of this is like the Justin Bieber or like whoever the hot pop guy is. This is who this guy was. He was hugely popular. In July 1814, the two eloped to France and Switzerland, taking Mary's stepsister Claire Clairmont with them. This was a big scandal.
but I mean, he was
Shelley,
already married
yeah, and had a child.
and
Hmm.
eloped, so he was
Yeah,
oh,
he
he was
abandoned
a
his wife and child and
bigamist.
left with. So, well, no, because he didn't marry Mary
Oh,
Wollstonecraft. He just, when they say eloped, it means left. It means
okay.
snuck off. They didn't get married. Um, uh, Although they would consider themselves married in their, yeah, she was 15. I
Good
mean,
lord.
they would have considered themselves married in spiritual or in romantic sense. Shelley was married, and the trio traveled openly. Godwin, despite his radical beliefs, was furious and cut off contact for some time. The next years brought instability, constant travel, financial strain, and devastating losses. Mary's first child, a daughter, died within weeks of birth. And in her journal, she wrote, "My baby is dead. Will it wake and weep? Will it awake and weep again? I thought it smiled at me." Three more children followed, and only one, Percy Florence Shelley, survived to adulthood. In October of 1816, at this point she's 17 years old, tragedy struck again. Mary's half sister, Fanny Imlay, took her own life with an overdose of laudanum. Loss and abandonment were not abstractions for Mary, they were her lived reality. In Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein's immediate rejection of his creation and the creature's desperate search for companionship reflect these themes. By the time she began writing, Mary had endured enough grief to give her story a deep emotional weight that set it apart from other Gothic tales. The science of life and death. The early 19th century was a time when science was beginning to probe mysteries once left to religion and myth. One of the most talked about was galvanism. You and I actually talked about this a little bit when we talked about the Antoine LeBlanc case in Morristown. So people were really getting into this, right? Into
Okay.
how can electricity, how much of us is the spark of life natural, or is the spark of life divine? And these were the things, right? So galvanism was digging into that. In the 1870s, Luigi Galvani discovered that a frog's legs twitched when he struck it with a spark. His nephew Giovanni Aldini took this further, performing public demonstrations on human corpses, as one does.
Oh,
It's like leave the frogs alone. Let's get the dead bodies out here. In January of 1803 in London, Aldini applied electrodes to the body of George Forster, who was executed just hours before. Witnesses reported the jaw quivering, one eye opening,
jeez.
the right hand clenching, and some thought he may have restored life. And you can imagine that that's what it looked like to people,
Mm,
because the functions of the body were life. So if you could replicate the functions of the body, it would seem like a very short leap that the body was alive, right? So Mary knew of these experiments. In the preface to her 1831 publication, she wrote, "Perhaps a corpse would be reanimated. Galvanism had given token of such things. Perhaps the component parts of a creature might be manufactured, brought together, and endued with vital warmth. She leaves Victor's method deliberately vague, hinting at a spark of life, but focusing on the moral question. Not can we do something, but should we do it? Her Victor straddles two worlds, the alchemy of Agrippa and Periclesis, and the chemistry of Humphrey Davy. In doing so, Mary captures her own era's collision between the medieval dreams and modern science. And I think that's it's actually really important kind of now too, especially we talk a lot about AI, but where you have this idea of what we're capable of, but do we understand the repercussions of it? Do we understand the ramifications of it? And do we create something that we can't control? Should we do that? We do that all the time, but should we? The Gothic tradition. So Frankenstein is firmly rooted in Gothic literature. The Gothic novel had emerged in the late 18th century with Walpole's The Castle of Otranto. And if you've never read it, you probably shouldn't. It's very boring. By our standards, it's important.
Whatever I thought you were going to say, it wasn't that.
It was not that. There are better examples, although it is the first. So it has a value for having been the first. But by contemporary standards, it's a yawn fest. And then later, Anne Radcliffe's The Mysteries of Udolpho. And what's really interesting to me is how many women were writing at this time period, and they were writing these creepy, dark stories, but that were also very like detailed on the social structure of things. These tales featured crumbling castles, dark landscapes, secrets, and the supernatural. Mary kept the mood but altered the substance. Instead of a haunted castle, she gave us bleak mountains, icy wastes, and dim laboratories. Instead of ghosts, she gave us a creature made by human hands. The terror of Frankenstein comes not from spirits, but from science, from what happens when ambition overreaches morality, when man tries to dominate nature without respecting its laws or its boundaries. Mary tapped into what critics called the sublime, the feeling of awe and terror before something vast, whether it be a storm or the mystery of life itself. Mary subtitled The Modern Prometheus, and I called it Prometheus Unbound earlier. It's the modern Prometheus, is telling. In Greek mythology, Prometheus was the Titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind, an act of defiance that brought both enlightenment and punishment. Like Zeus was pissed.
Yeah.
Zeus was annoyed. And he had a terrible punishment from it too. Victor Frankenstein is a modern Prometheus. He seizes the fire of creation, defying natural boundaries, but his punishment is relentless. The loss of his loved ones, the destruction of his life's work, and a life consumed by guilt. For Mary, steeped in romantic philosophy, this myth carried a warning. Progress without responsibility courts disaster. And that's a very important, and honestly, again, it's one of these stories that we think we know. And then when you go back and you start really looking at it, you're like, this was so much deeper than a scary monster, right? It's scarier, the publication and reception. So when Mary finished Frankenstein in May of 1817, Percy Shelley helped edit it, and it was published anonymously because a woman publishing it would have created havoc, and it would have not sold, but there also would have been a lot of backlash from it. In January of 1818, it was published by Lackington, Hughes, Harding, Mayer, and Jones in London. Many assumed that Percy Shelley was the author, not least because of the book's dedication to William Godwin and Percy's and his own preface. The reviews were mixed. Some praised its imagination and power. Others condemned it as disgusting absurdity, but it sold and it spread. And by 1823, Frankenstein had been adapted for the stage in Richard Brinsley's Peake's new play, Presumption, or The Fate of Frankenstein. And this was where the now iconic line, "It's alive!" began to take root in popular culture. Mary revised and republished the novel in 1831, adding her famous preface and softening some of Victor's harsher traits. This edition became the standard text for generations. So the legacy, in the 2 centuries since publication, so it was in 2018 was the 200th anniversary of its publication. And it was celebrated worldwide. People who aren't interested in the subject matter may not have been aware of it, but most major museums offered some kind of some kind of something about it, and in fact, there were several different things that happened in New York City and around it. And it was really interesting to see how it was praised and how it was honored, and specifically her. So it's never gone out of print. It's inspired countless adaptations, from Boris Karloff's tragic monster in the 1931 film to modern retellings in literature, film, and television. And we all know the trope when we see it, right? We all know the trope. It remains a touchstone in discussions of scientific ethics, from cloning to artificial intelligence. The creature's question to Victor, "I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather thy fallen angel," still resonates in debates about creation and responsibility. And perhaps most importantly, it remains a very deeply human story about isolation, ambition, and the longing to belong. So I think it's worth. I will say this: you don't have to read Walpole's book, but you definitely should read Frankenstein. Frankenstein it's an extremely well written novel, with very deep. Very deep subjects, a lot of subtext, and people who read it now sometimes are like, "Oh yeah, I knew that." The reason why you knew it is because this book was so prescient and was so well written, and really exposed a certain thing about humanity, and so well, that I don't know that anyone's done it better than this book. And so it still is a very, very prevalent work. So, ta-da!
So, no, I mean, that was a great pick, because, it's something that it's like, yeah, it's so pervasive in our culture, right? It's such a threat, especially now as
Oh
we're
yeah.
entering into kind of monster season and everything. And, but we forget about it. I think the origin story is much more compelling than the modern kind of adaptations.
Yeah, I mean, and when you read the book, and we all have this reaction, I mean, Frankenstein is iconic. The Frankenstein's monster is iconic, right? Um, but when you read the book, what you realize is the Frankenstein's monster. He quoted philosophy. He was not this. He was not this creature that couldn't communicate. He was not. He felt the loss of the connection to humanity. I mean, that's what the whole book is about. The whole book is about, you created this creature, and then you cast him out. And so you created life, but then didn't give him because you were afraid of what you had created and you couldn't control what you had created, you absolved yourself of the responsibility of creating the social construct around him. And so the entire, it's a revenge story, but like Frankenstein's monster is eloquent and, quotes poetry. And, what he's missing is, it's not his humanity, it's the connection to humanity. And so this is a really deep book. This is a book that has so many different structures. What I thought was really interesting was, it was written at a time when we look back on that, it's 200 years ago. We think, wow, it's ancient, but the things that we're struggling with today, they were struggling with then as well. And what I found really interesting was the genre that was used to illuminate that, and to me, it's like kind of how we talk about things, the genre is so flexible that one of the best ways to kind of get into people's, you know, psyche is to talk about the things that they're afraid of, is to make them a little bit afraid, because that's like, that's like the rock in your shoe that distracts you so that you can kind of, get other things in there. And I always found Mary Shelley to be really fascinating. And the summer in Lake Geneva is very fascinating as well. Uh, Polidori, who was Byron's physician, was 22. Byron was a jerk. Byron was very abusive.
I'm
He
not
was,
laughing. I'm just laughing at your
yeah, no, he's a
wording.
total jerk.
I'm
He's
not.
a total jerk. Yeah, no, he was not a pleasant. He's not a good guy. Very talented, had his own issues. But, used the excuse of being bohemian as an excuse to be immoral. And I don't mean that in a rigid kind of like social way. I mean things that everyone would consider like mistreating people. Um, uh, in fact, Claire Claremont, who's mentioned in this, like I said, she was like 16, um, and she was pregnant with his child in that summer. And he pretty much just, abandoned, he ignored that and didn't really take responsibility for that. But Polidori was his physician, and he wrote a story called Lord Ruthven. And Lord Ruthven was a vampire. It was not very well written. It was an interesting story, but it was not very well written. And he was this sexy vampire that we know now. And he based the character on
Oh,
Byron. So
wow.
he's essentially like, because there was a weird love a relationship there. And when it was published, people thought Byron had written it, right? And so it became very successful. And Byron was furious because he was like, I didn't write this crap, because it was not very well written, But there were enough people that disliked Byron that they kept supporting the sales of this. And Lord Ruthven very much did become one of the points that Stoker read. Polidori ends up killing himself.
Oh, no.
It's said that he died of a brain injury, and the brain injury was a bullet
Oh,
in his
my
brain,
goodness.
and largely because of, or at least to some people believe, because of the abuse that he received at the hands of Byron, and also because they did apparently have some kind of a physical relationship. So it was a time when those things were understood to happen, but never
Good
really was
Lord.
considered appropriate. So that weekend, or that I should say, it was more than a weekend, but that few weeks in Geneva gave us Frankenstein's monster, and to a large degree Dracula.
I'm saying good Lord because, there's so much tragedy woven through this, I think a lot of times when we read these stories or we learn about these people, usually most people in school, um, they're more two-dimensional for us,
Yeah.
or they're kind of packaged in a way that just kind of glosses over a lot.
Yeah, and I think once you see the word Lord in front of someone's name, you presume something, or just like if you see doctor, I mean, at the time,
Or Prince.
or Prince, yeah, at the time, doctor, a doctor would not have necessarily been uh, uh, a career that would have made you money. And it wasn't necessarily entirely respected either. Um, Surgeon was a little bit more, I think, at the time. And remember, he was 22, so it's not like he went to 12 years of school, to become
God,
this.
we could
Um,
talk for hours about just the parallels we're seeing now, and I'm trying to be
yeah.
thoughtful because people are like, "I just wanna hear about the spooky stuff," but things like abuse of power, like,
Oh yeah,
appropriate
yeah, yeah, yeah,
age,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You know
differences.
what's interesting to me too is how this story has been told, even the story of how the story was created, because there's been several films made about the time in Lake Geneva.
What's a good one
And
that people should watch? Because I was thinking I would wanna see one of those films, actually.
I don't know that there's a good one.
Okay. What's the least bad one?
There was one Shelley, that was, I can't remember the actress's name, because I don't remember anything anymore. But it was produced in 2014. I think it was Elle Fanning was in it, and it's not terrible. It's pretty good. There was
We have to
another
Google
one.
it.
There was another one that was made in the 90s called Gothic, and that one had Gabriel Burns was in it, and he played Shelley, and there were a few well-known people that were in it as well. He didn't play Shelley, he played Byron, excuse me. But the interesting thing about that one was, you know, what you're getting, you want to get good actors,
Yeah.
right? But it's kind of like getting a 30-year-old to play Romeo and Juliet, you know?
Yeah.
So because it's like she was 18. She was 18. Shelley was 26. You know, Shelley was 25 or 26 years old. So it is one of those things where um, the story gets told, but the actors are not really representative of, you know,
Right.
of who was there. Whereas the Elle Fanning one, and I do think it was called, I think it was called Shelley. She's age appropriate. The actor who's plays Shelley is age appropriate. They do get in, and they're critical of Shelley in that work, or at least they're honest about what's
Yeah.
happening. Shelley, when Shelley was 28, he had an 8-year-old. I think his daughter was 8 or 9, but or even older, because Shelley died at 28. So, um, you know, it was a different
Yeah.
time, but they were still young people.
Yeah.
You know, well, what's very interesting is almost, I mean, all of them had tragic ends. You know, including Mary Shelley. I mean, she kind of was destitute her whole life. Never really made any money on it. Her children died. You know, she had one child that lived to, and because Shelley died young, she kind of became, you know, his success protected her to a certain degree from the horror of having chosen to live a life that wasn't, you know,
Not sanctioned,
supported
really.
by, yeah, sanctioned by society. And I mean, you know, at the end of the day, Shelley did leave his wife. He did leave his child. He had been forced into this marriage when he was 16, you know, because she had gotten pregnant. So they both had gotten forced into it. And he was disowned, so they didn't have any money. He was a very successful as far as people enjoying his work, but nobody, you know,
Nobody made money, I
they
don't
weren't
think.
making money. And so, but it is, you know, I mean, right from the beginning, you know, her life was there was a lot of tragedy that went over her life. But the reason why I thought it was interesting too, like one of the things that I didn't get into in the podcast, but I mean into that part of it, but there was a, you know, when they drove past this place as they were going to Lake Geneva, and they went past the Frankenstein's castle, um, the Frankenstein that she was, colloquially, the story that she was told was about an alchemist, and he was trying to bring back life. I mean, that was one of the things that alchemy, you know, was trying to do. He was trying to find the magical component that would bring the dead back to life. So these stories that she was hearing in folklore, and as they were, you know, traveling, they all kind of went into her brain, and then they came out in this really remarkable work.
I'm gonna tell you, like, what kept popping in my mind, and you're gonna be like, "That's completely off the card." Like, that's, like, totally not what we're talking about, but when I think about when you were talking about, you know, the responsibility that comes with, scientific advancement, and it does, and let me I am pro-science, and I think there's so much we can do to help people live longer and better lives, but I think things do get a little tricky, and, you know, I saw recently in the news, and you probably saw this too, that scientists were able to take ancient direwolf DNA and create new direwolves. So Romulus and
Mhm.
Remus, they named them, which is also interesting, and we can get into that.
Jurassic Park.
We well,
So it's like this. So you're telling me we can go to Jurassic Park?
well, the thought I had was like, "Is that a good idea? Like, is it good for them, and is it good for the rest of us?" And what else are people trying to bring back to life? And yeah, Jurassic Park, like, I remember when people would be like, "How did you get from, you know
From
Mary Shelley
Frankenstein, yeah,
to Jurassic Park?"
Jurassic Park
Yes.
to
Yeah,
Raptors.
the Velociraptor is coming to get you, but, like, I have to tell you, like, when these movies come out, it's not because no one has otherwise thought about that would be a great idea
Mhm.
to do it, and I'm just like, "Please, God, no." Like,
Well, Michael Crichton was a scientist, right?
yeah,
He
he
was a
was a he
doctor,
was a physician, yeah.
he was a physician, and but he talked a lot about how it was a flip of a coin whether or not he would become invested in research or what, because Andromeda Strain, like you can see where his interest was, but he Jurassic Park, one of the books of Jurassic Park is called Lost World. And The Lost World is a book by Conan Doyle, right? Where he imagines this place in the world where dinosaurs haven't died, like that's the whole
Ooh,
point. But what I always think of when I think of science, because I think science, there's a difference between science figuring out what it can do and us then doing it and commodifying it, right? And figure, oh, building a park, that can do it, or unleashing it into the wild. Like, so there was that ethical question of, do you destroy smallpox? Because they'd gotten to the point where smallpox was essentially eradicated, and they had the last, example of it. And it's like, do we keep this because it existed and we don't know if it's going to be useful someplace else or if we're going to need it for something else? Or do we absolutely 100% prevent this from ever coming back by destroying it? Right? Like that's a legitimate argument. That's a legitimate, concern. But for me, when I think of creating things and then being like, hopefully we figure out how to control this, was nuclear power, was the H bomb, right? So where it's like, we're going to unleash holy hell and just hope that at some point we figure out how to control this. And I grew up, in the 80s and the 90s, and the fear of nuclear fallout
right.
was, I mean, we were terrified of it. There's certain things that it's hard for people today who didn't grow up in that time to really truly understand how much a part of our psyche these fears are. And to me, nuclear holocaust was absolutely something that I was daily afraid of.
Like,
Right. So when you look at something that is man-made, and unleashing it and saying, let's try and do this just because we can, without like only having your foot on the gas and nobody having their foot on the brake, that's terrifying. And for Mary Shelley, the argument was not just the repercussions to us, but the repercussions to what we create. Right? Because yes, Victor Frankenstein suffered because his creation was furious and was upset, but his creation was also miserable and unhappy and immortal. I mean, this was never going to change. And I'm not going to spoiler alert at the end of it, but it's not a happy
not
ending.
good. It's not good.
It's not a terrific ending.
Well, you're talking about people, you're talking about when things are ego driven or driven by greed versus looking at the larger picture and taking things very seriously and weighing them very carefully.
Yeah.
And I think we need
And
to be more thoughtful. Like,
I agree. I mean, and like, I have to say, to me, Frankenstein is one of the scariest stories, right? And it's not because there's a ghost.
no,
It's because it's because I don't intrinsically trust the human race to always do what's right.
God,
And
no.
and we can always say, well, if things have a way of working
Not
out and they bounce out. It's like,
necessarily. No,
no, no, no,
we're not
they
doing
don't.
well.
Just because we survive doesn't mean we had to do it this way.
Right.
It's like people, well, it all comes out in the wash. No, no,
No.
no, no, no. We've destroyed things. Things have been destroyed. There's a lot more that's in our hands and in our power than we think. I did find it fascinating
Oh,
though, and
yeah.
I mean, I've always found that weekend fascinating. In fact, I'm going to say, Tracy, you and I should go and spend a summer in Lake Geneva.
I'll have to save up for it.
I also thought it was very interesting that the kind of what was happening at the time was impacting what they thought about. Like, for instance, the fact, because there's a couple of huge volcanic eruptions that happen between the late 18th century and the late 19th century that really fundamentally change, like, they so heavily impact the climate that you can see it in popular culture. You can see it in literature. You can hear it in songs. And because people become ill from it, and even things where you have like gas lights are suddenly invented because of I think it was Krakatoa or something like that, that led to certain things, but the fact that, this volcanic eruption, which is nature, right? This volcanic eruption has so fundamentally changed the environment that it's changing the thinking and the way people are thinking. And I also thought it was really interesting that Mary Shelley was prone to these dreams. And I will say, I am sure there was quite a bit of wine
And maybe
that was
some other
consumed.
stuff. I'm
No,
assuming.
100%
I'm
other stuff.
assuming some other
A
stuff.
hundred. I'm going
Loosen
to
up the
tell you,
psyche a
Tracy,
bit.
100% was happening. But we don't tend to think of people in the 1818 as being, we look at these people and think, oh, they were affluent. They may have, they may have been privileged, or they may have grown up with the privilege of education, but none of them had money. None of these people had money. And not only did they not have money, their place in society prevented them from having a trade. So you could be a person that's like, yeah, you're smart as anything, but no one's hiring you to be a teacher. No one's hiring you to, your status is preventing you from making a living. And so that's why we talk about it as if, oh, they were on vacation. They weren't on vacation. They got kicked out of England, like Byron was running from debtors, and so you have that too. You have that kind of, where we think of it as leisure, but it was also panic, so all of these things were kind of conspiring. And what I love is that an 18-year-old girl came up with it.
Oh, yeah, and again, I don't wanna take this down yet another road because 'cause we've already been chatting for a bit, but obviously everything happens in a social context, and every expression of our own emotions or creativity, our decisions, nothing is free from the influence of the context. And, I was just thinking when you were saying quite a bit earlier about how many women were writing things that were very dark at this time. And it's like, yeah, because if you were a woman at this time, you were married off against your will, you had no ability to support yourself or live independently or make a decision. Mary Shelley couldn't publish something because it wouldn't have been accepted. Couldn't publish,
Right.
and worse, and so many other things. I mean, women were little more than objects, and I can
Well, I
imagine
mean,
the dark inner landscape there.
I think though that there's something to be said for the women who were writing, right? They were in this weird liminal space because they were educated, right? They had the opportunity to write, they had the ability to write, and they had been granted the opportunity to learn. And then they were told that's
Yeah.
it,
They
right?
didn't really have any
You
rights, there no freedom.
Well, in England, they, I mean, they did like I understand what you're saying, um, but these women kind of did,
For
right?
that
And
time, for that
yeah,
time.
for that time, I mean, like Radcliffe, she was wealthy. She had, and she is a very important writer because she did publish under her own name, but it is true, like you have these very articulate, very well written, very articulate um, writers and novels where really, there's a point at which you realize this is what I'm allowed to do. This is the level that I'm allowed to go to. The interesting thing about Mary Shelley though was her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, and her father. Both of them were absolute advocates for women's equality, not only in education but in everything. And her dad was annoyed and pissed that she had run off with this
Probably
guy.
ashamed, I'm sure.
Well, I think he was just kind of like, really, this guy, you ran off with this sexy guy, you could run off with a brainiac, but yeah, I mean, it was interesting on so many different levels. And yes, it may not have been that creepy, but if you read the book, you will realize how creepy it really, really is. The monster is terrible. So there's always that question, who's the monster, right? Is it Frankenstein or is his creation, right? And there's an argument to be made that it's Frankenstein,
Yeah,
right? There's an argument to be made that it's Victor Frankenstein.
100%.
But the book is terrifying. It is, like, if you read it, it is scary. It's long and it's tedious to a certain degree, but the ideas and the concepts in it are very frightening.
Now, is this available at Paranormal Books and
Oh,
Curiosity?
yes, of course.
So
Of
people
course. You can
can
pick up
go.
all of your Gothic literature at
Yes.
Paranormal Books and
And
Curiosities.
maybe in between episodes of Curious Explorers, you could stream one of the movies
Yeah,
you mentioned.
yeah. I'm gonna recommend that you do the 2018 one,
Okay.
with Elle Fanning, because I just think it's a better representation of, both the work and her life. And it's much more about her life than it is about just only the book. But it's worth it. Just do it.
Just
What
do
else
it.
do you got to do?
Seriously.
What else are you doing with your
You have
time?
more freedom to do other things now, but this is
Yes.
what we're telling you to do.
Yes. Listen, you have your own autonomy, but
Use it to choose the
this is a heavy suggestion.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Kath, it was so great to see you. Thank you so
It's
much
good to
for
see
your
you.
very interesting presentation today. Very
Thank you very
compelling.
much.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
everyone, please let us know what you think and what else you would like to see us talking about as we get
Yes.
creepier at our curious, creepy countdown to Halloween.
Yes. And also do us a favor and rate us, review us, share us with friends. I know everybody always says that, but the truth of the matter is it
Really
really
does
is
help us.
helpful, and it really, really, it does impact us. And also, shoot us an email, drop us a line on any of our social media. We'd love to engage with you guys and get a conversation going.
Absolutely. So, this has been another episode of Curious Explorers. So great to hang with our beautiful beloveds and see you, Kath. And everyone, as always, until next time, stay curious.
Keep exploring.
Bye for now.
I know that the paranormal is real. Listen.
You've just listened to the Curious Explorers podcast with the Kathy Kelly and Tracy Stein. If you enjoyed the episode, remember to like, share, follow, leave us a comment, let us know what you think. And of course, until next time, stay curious.
The paranormal is real. It is real. The paranormal is real. Is it? The paranormal is real. It is real. The paranormal.